I'd like to call to order the Pompano Beach Planning and Zoning Board meeting for Wednesday, March 27th, 2024. Bobby, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Joan Kovac, Tundra King,
Here.
Richard Kloskowitz,
Here.
Derek Lewis,
Here.
Darlene Smith,
Here.
Carrie Ann Worley,
Here.
Carla Coleman.
Here. Our illustrious chair, Fred Stachler, is away on a trip, but we will welcome him back next month. As per our usual practice, we're going to observe a quick 30-second moment of silence. Thank you. Next item agenda is approval of the minutes from the February 28th, 2024 meeting. Has everybody had a chance to look those over?
I would make a motion to approve the minutes from the February 28th, 2024 meeting.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Bobby, will you please call the roll?
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz,
Yes.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Worley,
Yes.
Carla Coleman.
Yes. I didn't ask if anybody had any corrections to them, but speak now or forever hold your peace.
We would have spoken up.
Next item, for anyone testifying tonight, we need to place you under oath. So Bobby, would you please take care of that item?
If anyone will be speaking tonight, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you. Our first item tonight is project number 24-165401, parking reduction fiber-built umbrellas for a major administrative adjustment. Lauren, you gonna tell us what's going on tonight?
Yes, hello. Good evening, everyone. Lauren Gratzer, Planning and Zoning for Development Services. This project is the major administrative adjustment for the fiber-built parking reduction. So just a quick location of where this property is located. It's on the northeast corner of Northwest 23rd Avenue and West Atlantic Boulevard. This is an aerial of the property. It's surrounded by residential to the north, commercial to the east, and the post office to the west. So the applicant is requesting a major administrative adjustment for a 40% reduction of the required parking spaces on the site. They're currently required to have 240 parking spaces, and they're requesting to have 144, a reduction of 96 spaces. The proposed building on the site is a retail furniture store, which is the same use as the existing buildings that are currently there. This application is being concurrently submitted with the minor site plan, and because it's a minor, the approval will just be administrative. It won't come in front of this board. The zoning of this property is RM12 and B3, which is multifamily and general business. The applicant is also in the process of doing a rezoning to make the entire property the B3 commercial zoning. And the land use is low, medium residential. So should the board find that the application has provided competent substantial evidence to satisfy the review standards for a major administrative adjustment approval, the Development Services Department recommends the following 3 conditions. Number 1, the final site plan approval shall be approved via the site plan PZ number. The attached site plan is just for the conceptual review only. Number 2, if this application is approved, the applicant shall record the development order and administrative adjustment document with Broward County, and a copy of that recorded approval shall be submitted at time of building permit. And number 3, the standard condition of approval, that the plans are subject to compliance with all applicable code requirements, including but not limited to the DRC comments for the site plan. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions on behalf of staff, and the applicant is here as well for questions.
Any questions of staff? Okay, I've got one. This is a very large reduction of parking.
Yes, the 40% is the maximum permitted for a major administrative adjustment.
I did read the parking study, but I will hold other questions till after the applicants had a chance to talk. Okay, no questions, no more questions for staff. We'll hear from the applicant.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm John Tice, architect with Gallo Herbert Architects for the applicant. I've also brought with me Carl Peterson, our traffic analyzer and parking expert, and also we have Joshua Pinsky, our owner's attorney. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Tice, can you just give your office address, please?
It's 1311 West Newport Center Drive in Deerfield Beach.
Okay. Did you have a presentation for us tonight, or is that the presentation?
I didn't really prepare a presentation. I think it was pretty straightforward, but I did hear your concern, and if that's a question, I can talk a little bit more about what we're trying to achieve and how we arrived at the parking reduction.
I'd just like kind of for you to give us a history of how you ended up with such deficit parking from day one, and what you need to give us some justification for considering this.
I can certainly speak to that. A little bit of history on the project. The building has always been a furniture store. It was originally a Carl's outdoor furniture store. And the other two uses in the building are also design center type uses, which are large product showrooms, tile, wallpaper, things of that nature, bulky things. So typically, furniture type stores have got very large showrooms, and they also have very large inventory spaces behind them. It's not a warehouse, but it's an inventory space, which has a very low, occupant load in terms of employees, customers, et cetera. The site has functioned quite adequately all these years. So here I have up on the board here the existing site, which has the existing building, the existing parking on Atlantic, and up the side street here as well. So basically this project, the owner has acquired these vacant parcels back here, which the new building is intended to go in. I'll put that here. And we're upgrading the entire site. As part of upgrading the entire site, we're re-landscaping the entire property. And one of the things that we're doing is we're having to add in a very large retention area to come up to drainage standards, which chews up a lot of the site. And we've basically set up the building with the same type uses, furniture type, design center uses. And we wanted to check with our owner, Mr. Paul Knapp, to make sure we had the parking for that. The density of the public in these type spaces is quite low. So we had to help arrive at that number. So we hired Carl Peterson to help us actually do a study and analyze. It might have Carl come up and help me explain how we got to the number we needed. But basically, the trick is to arrive at, it's not a trick, it's a balancing act to create a developable piece, a building area that's adequate to meet the needs and meet the parking and meet the drainage and all the other things that we need to meet. We're very confident we've arrived at the right number. But I'll let Carl talk a little bit about the parking study and analysis.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Carl Peterson, KBP Consulting. Office is at 8400 North University Drive, and for the record, I have been sworn in. So your question is a very good one. When I was brought into this project, the question was, of course, can we satisfy the parking demand that's likely to occur with this? And I really, I find these types of parking studies to be very useful in that we're actually taking a look at what's going on the site rather than theoretical parking calculations based upon either code or industry standards. We're getting an actual picture of what's occurring on the site. And so that's what we've done. The peak demand days at this particular facility, and as John explained, this is kind of a home improvement type area where they have, quartz and cabinetry, wallpaper, those types of things, tile. And so the typical retail parking demand that you would see at, say, a public shopping center or a Home Depot or something doesn't materialize at this type of facility, or of like a home furniture type parking demand that you would see is drastically lower than standard retail. And so we identified there are two busiest days of the week, Tuesdays and Saturdays are their busiest days in terms of a weekday being Tuesday, busiest weekend day being Saturday. And we studied these locations all day during the entire operating hours on both of those days to document the actual parking demand that was being exhibited by this site, which is fully operational and has been for many years. And we documented that parking demand. What we do then is we also adjust for peak season conditions. I'm not sure that peak season is really a characteristic of this type of facility, but nonetheless we scaled it up by 6-7% based on the days to reflect the counts that were taken in September and reflecting what they would be theoretically if the count were done in February or March. We also then superimposed the parking demand that we're expecting to see associated with the new facilities based upon code. And I think we've overestimated that demand because the retail component, I don't expect to generate that much parking demand, but nonetheless, we have calculated that demand based upon what the code would require for retail space. There's also a furniture store component which parks at a lower rate. But being the location, obviously it doesn't have frontage on Atlantic, it's tucked in the back, it's going to be a similar type operation to what's there today. And we actually came up with, as you probably saw in the report, a actual site-specific parking rate that you would could theoretically apply. We've gone way above and beyond that. And we've demonstrated in our study that we will have adequate parking supply, even assuming those worst-case scenarios with the city's parking rate applied to the new uses. We will still have a surplus parking supply on this site. And I think that's very important. I mean, I think, my experience in my 34-year career is that oftentimes we find places that are what I call overparked. I mean, obviously there's examples of places that are underparked, but I really cringe when I see these facilities that provide way more parking than is necessary, because it creates an impervious situation. It's not good for the environment. And so I think it's really important for us to really focus in on what parking demand is at a specific site and match that demand with supply rather than just providing. In this case, I think the parking requirement was 240 spaces. That would never materialize on a site like this, and it would just be an abundance of impervious area that would be of no benefit. So if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to elaborate on those.
Questions from the board?
I just have this concern.
Ms. Smith, can you just turn your mic on?
The hold on, I'm just far away. There we go. If the use of this property 10, 20 years down the road isn't used for this business, would there be a shortage of parking for the next person that owns the property? And would we be revisiting this and having to increase parking, which there's nowhere to increase it with what I'm seeing on the plan? That concerns me.
Right. It's a good question. In terms of what would be allowable at this site, I would have to defer to staff as to what type of uses could potentially locate here. Obviously, this site was previously a Carl's furniture store. It's traditionally been in that vein along the lines of furniture's type store, which has a lower parking demand than, say, traditional retail. So I'd defer to staff as to what would be allowable at this location if this property should change hands. I don't know if,
Yes, exactly. It's a commercial property. The future uses would most likely be retail or restaurants or anything. That was a major concern of staff as well, the future use of this property. But they wanted to come in front of you guys to make that decision.
Let me ask a little bit more pointed question here. Can we tie this reduction in parking to their use only?
Yeah, 1 second.
Hi, good evening, Max Williams, Development Services. So this approval will be tied to the site plan, and the site plan includes the proposed uses. So anybody that's going to come forward in the future to occupy the space will be a similar retail showroom type of use. Now, if the permitted parking isn't sufficient for their business and it is a permitted use for the property, we would not be able to reject it on the parking calculation alone. They would have to make that decision for themselves. Should in the future somebody consider substantially upgrading the site, we would again go through the site planning process. The prior approved administrative adjustment would no longer apply, and they would have to retrofit the site to accommodate additional parking. So it will exist like this for a long time to accommodate the types of uses that are being proposed today.
Other questions? Ms. Smith, did you get your question answered?
I did.
Okay. I just have one more question, and that is, how many staff, how many employees work at this site between all the businesses?
That's a good question for the owner, who's unfortunately not here. These are not staff-intense businesses. You have salespeople, you have stock people that work in the back. You've been to furniture.
Yeah, but if there's
showrooms,
40 or
and
50
they're
staff among all of the businesses for the staff, that takes up, more than a third of the parking.
Yeah, Carl, on any given day, the days that you were there, the numbers of parking spaces between customers and staff still did not exceed a fraction of the total number that were there. We could definitely speak to that. I do want to point out that if you look at the site plan here, the area, there's a large paved area which is in the back, the loading portion of the existing building. If this were not used for deliveries and whatnot, this could be parked out. If this were changed to more of a restaurant or a different type use, there are places you could create parking spaces. But it's never functioned that way. It's always functioned as a furniture store. So, one of the things that we propose about this whole project is this is a residential area back here. What we're proposing is a new building with a nice storefront that faces the residential, so they don't have to look at the back of a loading area. So this building essentially screens that neighborhood from this truck loading area, which needs to remain. And we even have some access points in the back of our building as well. So this is a large paved area that it could, if this were to change, you could put parking spaces here.
I think that you're getting, this is a hard decision for us because this is a 40% reduction in parking. This is not something that we do lightly or often. So, so we have a lot of things to consider here. But I don't have any more questions at this point. Do any of you?
I have one more. Can you go back to the one to where your property is now without the additional building? I think that was the one before. So it's vacant in the back, and that's
Right.
along, what's the road in the back?
There isn't one. There's a back of residences there, and then
Okay.
I'm not sure what that road is back there.
Have you talked to the greater Collier City community about, because right now, yeah, they're looking at the back of a building, but they also don't have a retail in their backyard either, so.
Right. There's some other issues with homeless and other activities back here that are causing a problem for the neighborhood and for the business as well. It's a bit of a problem. So we're we're going to be putting a new buffer wall here, all new landscaping along this edge. This is actually a little parking area that's not used. It's a paved area. So we're actually converting that to a green retention area because we need to bring up the drainage. So we are losing that, but it's not used. Also, there are some original plans that show some parking back here. Well, there's never been cars parked here. This is a truck loading area, so they turn around there. So those parking spaces that were planned originally, you'll see that in original plans, were never used. We have added parking for employees back here for the people that work in the stock areas, as well as the main work areas. So we're very, very confident that we've matched the requirements and the needs. It's the same type use, and it works really quite well.
I didn't hear her question get answered. Did I miss it? Did we meet with the citizens in that area?
So if I may, Joshua Pinsky, I'm attorney for 2201
I
LLC.
didn't see you get sworn in, did you, sir?
I am not testifying, I'm attorney for them. I can fill you in on what we've done before this board. We were actually before this board for the rezoning to the flex, for the flex zoning. And at that time, actually, there were members of the public who did speak. I know it was weighed by this board at that time. It was determined as to what was proper or needed or what was okay with this board for the use of that property. So we're really, I felt, sort of past that aspect of it. They were heard. Those decisions were already made, and we are trying to now implement the plans to develop property that was rezoned. One of the applications we have in is also for the abandonment of a unused right-of-way back there that this board asked us to go ahead and just process as part of the rezoning to the flex, and I believe Ms. Dolan was there for this as well.
And I just wanted to add and assure you that that abandonment's coming to P&Z next month, and there is a radius notice requirement for abandonments, so they'll get the notice again and be able to have another opportunity to come out. I don't know if you remember that there was a guy that had a lot of boats stored in his backyard, so he was talking a lot about the easement, and it isn't a full-length easement. There's like 3 lots that have it, and the only reason they have it was because those were tax deed lots, and the county asked for a half of a right-of-way, which would never be built. So there will be another notice going out. There will be another time they can come both here and to 2 readings of commission for that item, so that the public involvement on this is not done.
Ms. Dolan, just your name and title for the record.
Sorry. Yes, Jean Nolan, Development Services.
Okay, did that answer questions?
Well, kinda, because they didn't talk to the community, but I understand it probably is fixing a homeless encampment type area, and it would probably be an improvement to the neighborhood. But we just always like to hear from community.
They did talk to the community before the flex item came to us. And they will have another public notice when the abandonment comes. So I remember the discussion, because there was a guy that protested because he wouldn't be able to get his boats out when he was using property that wasn't his.
That was occurred then.
Yeah, that now it's coming into focus.
Yes, and so we saw that as sort of part 1 of this process. Yes.
I have a quick question.
Lewis?
There were 3 recommendations. Do you accept those by staff? The staff recommendations? Or sorry, conditions?
Yeah, we would have no objection. We certainly would meet those conditions.
Thank you for putting that on the record. Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any more discussion they want to do on this item? Then I will, no more questions. I need to open the public hearing. Anybody in the audience like to speak on this item? Well, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Now we can do discussion, and if there's no discussion, I will accept a motion on this item.
Make a motion.
Ms. King?
I'd like to make a motion that the board finds that competent and substantial evidence has been presented for LN 567 parking reduction that satisfies the review, and move for approval of the items with the said 3 conditions by staff.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz,
Yes.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Worley,
Yes.
Carla Coleman.
Yes. Good luck. We'll see you next month. Okay, item 2, Covenant Gardens Site Plan, P&Z number 21124031. And Lauren, you're up again.
I am up again. Let's see if it comes up. Okay. All right, good evening. Again, Lauren Gratzwer, Development Services. This item will be discussing the Covenant Gardens major site plan. So the general location of the property is on the east side of Northwest 27th Avenue between Atlantic Boulevard and Northwest 2nd Street. The aerial of the property is shown here. It's surrounded by a mix of residential, commercial, and a place of worship. The applicant is requesting approval of a major site plan in order to construct a 40-unit residential development with a tot lot included. The average height of the buildings are 22 feet. This major site plan was reviewed by the DRC 7 times since 2021, and it will be going to the Architectural Clearance Committee on April 2nd. The zoning district and land use of this property is B3, general business and commercial land use, and the applicant has obtained the residential flex allocation for this project. Should the board find that the application has provided competent substantial evidence to satisfy the review standards for a major site plan approval, Development Services Department recommends the following conditions. Number 1, is provide the recorded plat for the northern property with all recorded plat note amendments by the time of building permit approval. Number 2, a unity of title shall be submitted to staff unifying both subject properties prior to building permit approval. Number 3, any project consisting of phasing shall have all site amenities and landscaping installed on site prior to the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy or similar approval. Number 4, an easement agreement form shall be signed off by all utility agencies for the proposed wall, sidewalk, and pavers within the 10-foot easement surrounding the northern parcel. Number 5, the applicant shall dedicate 5 feet of the southern property along Northwest 27th Avenue for the purposes of right-of-way prior to building permit approval. Number 6, the elevation shall be revised to illustrate the awnings over the corner units on the west side of the property as shown on the site plan for building permit approval. Number 7, the dimension of the building height shown on the building section sheets do not match the heights shown on the elevations. All plans shall be consistent for building permit approval. And finally, number 8, the standard conditions of approval, including that the applicant shall provide evidence of compliance with all points used for the sustainability narrative. The applicant shall provide the final SCAD letter from the Broward County School Board. The plans are subject to compliance with all applicable code requirements. The landscape and irrigation plans must comply with all zoning code requirements, and a copy of the subted plan approved by the Broward Sheriff's Office must be submitted with the building permit. That concludes my presentation on behalf of staff. I can answer any questions, and then the applicant is here as well with the presentation.
Any questions for staff? Lauren, I have just one. You know, we've talked about this before. This project's coming to us before it's going to AAC.
Yes, I try to make it very clear to the applicants that it's not the preference of this board, but they move forward as they wish.
Okay. Well, we were quite plain with a previous attorney who came to us with that and asked her not to do it again. I'll make the same request tonight.
Understood.
Thank you. Okay, no questions for staff. We'll hear from the applicant.
Good evening. My name is James Kahn with Keith and Associates. I've been sworn in. 301 East Atlantic Boulevard. As basic general location that Lauren showed you, we're just north of Atlantic Boulevard and west of Power Line Road. Just to zoom in a little closer. On this parcel, you can see that there's a line right there. There's actually two parcels. The north parcel was a plat of record, and the south parcel was not platted. We have a determination from the Broward County Planning Council that the south parcel did not need to be platted. But it's a vacant parcel. We have commercial existing retail businesses to the south. There's the two parcels to the east are religious in nature. One's developed, one is owned by a church. Across the street is a vacant lot also that's owned by the CRA. I should say this lot was originally part of the CRA plan also. Just to show you the maps, the zoning map, you can see the red there it's commercial all around us there where we are. And it's B3 where we are, and going up 27th Avenue, it becomes B2. So the whole corridor has a commercial designation and a low density to the north. So this, as Lauren said, this has been in the process for quite a long time, since 2021. So it's gone through a lot since then. We had a neighborhood meeting back in May, the Greater Collier City, and it was very positive. They wanted to see the site developed with the plan that we have there. The plat note amendment was approved by the city and recorded with Broward County back this year, and also we received flex allocation from the city for 40 residential units, and we've made it through the DRC approval, so that's where we are now. That's where I'm picking this up. So just to give you some overall of the site, we have both lot coverage and the open space are within the code requirements. Just gives you just the basic outline here, but I have another slide here that kind of gives you the site plan. The site's small, it's only 2.67 acres. It's 40 residential, two-story units, and there's 61 required parking spaces by the CRA code, and we're providing 80 spaces. These are broken up into buildings. It's not one big massive buildings. They're individual buildings scattered throughout the site. We have a tot lot in the middle of the project, but kind of on the south end. And there's also a large green area in the middle, which also acts as open space and counts towards our, drainage requirements also. So you can see the site, it circulates around. It's got two driveways. There's great circulation, fire department, sanitation. Everyone can circulate around this site very nicely. There's plenty of parking, and it's a great layout. We finally got around to getting approved through staff after all these years and going through the plat note amendments and the flex units and all the processes. So this is the final plan. Just to give you an idea of the landscape plan, I counted on the landscape plan, if it was in your package, I just added up the trees. It was 179 trees and over 2,700 shrubs and ground cover. Believe it or not, that all fits on that site somehow, so it's going to be very well landscaped. So you can see from the plan there. With the buildings broken up, that helps allow to have more landscaping and green space. This would be an infill project. Just a general view of the site, typical. It's well designed. We've tried to incorporate all the items that the staff has asked for. Just give you some more general. We have of the buildings here. This is an infill site. This site was part of the CRA development. It is in the CRA development area, and this lot was owned by them. And they were part of the review process at the DRC, and they're supportive of this also. These will be rental apartments.
Market rate?
Yes, market rate. Staff and everyone seemed to be pushing for market rate in the area. It seems to be affordable, going up everywhere, and they wanted to put market rate here. They're trying to bolster the area. So these are market rate. That's pretty much the project. You know, it's an infill project that was supported by the CRA, and it's gone through years of getting to this point. To your question on the AAC, I can't answer that because I'm new to the project, but the design has been proposed for a while now, and what can I tell you? They could have gone to the AAC before, but we're scheduled on the 2nd, which isn't that far off. So
That's not the issue. The issue is the AARC often, with projects like this, makes changes. You are doing this at your own risk, because if there are major changes from what we approve, you will need to come back here. And I'm going to ask that you, in the future, strongly advise your clients not to do this.
I understand that. Believe me, I understand what you're saying, and I understand that if there's major changes, we'll have to address it back with you again. That's understood. We're hoping not to have that, but we will. And if I forgot to mention all the staff requirements, we agree to.
I was going to ask about that next. You've got a lot of requirements in there. I'm going to let the board ask questions before I launch into mine. So any questions for the applicant on this project?
Other than the drainage ditch area, is there any like designated places like for walking dogs or park area, green spaces?
Well, there's green areas throughout. There's that central area in the middle. It will be, in the rainy season, it could hold water, I assume. You know, that's pretty typical, but there is a whole grassed area in the very center of the project where there's a tot lot there also. So there's a, kind of, you can pick that up on the plan here. It would be right in the middle of the project, between those buildings. There's that green area that you can see on the landscape plan here. I can't point, so I don't. So there is a tot lot on the south end, and the other end is just an open area.
Is there a fence around the project, or is?
Yes, there's a 6-foot wall around the project to buffer us and the commercial area and, you know, adjacent uses.
Okay, I was having a great deal of problem looking at the different images online, because it was so hard to tell the detail. And so there's no connectivity to the streets, the north and south. The entrances are on the west side.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Lewis, did you get your question answered?
I'm looking at it's hard sometimes when it comes in this order of operations. Is there like an area where people can exercise within this community? I mean, I'm just looking at where it is and the location, and Just looking, I think about, okay, walking dogs, playing with kids, things like that. Where in this project are we seeing that?
Well, we have the tot lot in there. It's to the, I wish I could point out and show you, but
No,
it's
I can see
south-
I'm looking
it's
at it in the
middle on
site plan.
south end. There's
It's a tiny, tiny tot lot.
yes.
Right. So there's the tot lot, and then there's the drainage area next to
Yes.
it. And then I'm just trying to think practically for the people that are going to be
If
able
this was at 200 or 100 units, some odd, exercise areas or something, and it would have been different, we would have had things, but this is only a 2.6 acre lot. There's not much room for that. We tried to give as much open space as we could, and, we're constrained. We're going to give by the way, that I didn't mention the 5 feet on the right-of-way. The previous plat gave it, so we're giving that, what you saw, it was in 2 parcels, is that strip on the street we're giving also. And this site is taking all that into account also.
Any other questions? Smith?
This might be in conjunction with what Mr. Lewis is talking about. Where is the nearest community park? Because isn't there a community park on 27th, just a few blocks away from there?
It is.
And is it sidewalks with lighted sidewalks that between there? Can you point to where that is?
The McNair Park is the closest park.
Can you point to where that is on the map?
It's not within this area.
Oh,
Wow.
whoa, that's far away. I thought there was one on 27th. There is one, that's McNair. Oh, it is, okay.
Okay. While we're trying to figure out where the nearest parks are, let me ask another question. Channeling Mr. Stacer for a moment here, I notice in your graphics, your trees are all higher than the buildings, but on your landscaping plan, there might be 1 or 2 14-foot trees, but most of the trees are 12-foot trees. And we have been on thoroughfares, and 27th is a thoroughfare, trying to get the canopy a little higher than that. I know that along the stretch on 27th, if we could do 14 or 16-foot trees, that it would give those trees a real boost, because 12-foot trees are going to take a long time.
We would work with the urban forester and the species that would best fit there, whether it's a 14-foot or whatever we could work out. We would increase those trees on 27th.
You would agree to increase the height of the trees on 27th. All right, I'm going to leave it up to the forester whether they're 14 or 16, but can we put a condition in there that will increase the height of the trees on
I just want to
27th?
get with them, there's a spacing of the sidewalk and where they go.
Oh, I know.
I just want to make sure to
If possible.
get the right tree in the right place.
Well, it's going to have to grow, so whether you put it in at 12 or 14 or 16, it's still going to need the same space.
It will. It's just to be a problem faster.
Yeah.
That's all. Yes, we'll work with them.
If we could make that a new condition 8 and renumber the 8s, Lauren? Okay. Okay. So that means now there are 9 conditions.
I found the park. The park's
Okay.
9 blocks away, so it's definitely not walkable for
No,
children to go
it's
by
not.
that.
No question,
Yes, ma'am.
whenever you're done.
I'm done.
Did you obtain the statistical data for that area from our sheriff's office? Or the crime rate in that area?
I did not, but we did do a very detailed SEPTED plan that we work with the sheriff on and has to be approved. But we will take all the SEPTED measures possible to make the community safe, and we'll go by all his recommendations. And I can tell you it was a very detailed plan. There was one in the written report and the graphic, but one of your conditions is that we, get his approval.
Oftentimes, since I've been on the board, I can't speak from prior to my being assigned to the board, but sometimes it just seems as though it's just kind of cut and paste. We just check the boxes and so that you can meet your project. I'm not saying that that's your case. I live in the community, and we need to see a lot of changes in that community. So when we're putting up these projects, I'd like to see more. The trees aren't going to be grown to help us in that area. I like to see way more security. I know it might meet the standard of what staff is requiring, but we've had some serious issues in that area. We have several homicides that remain unsolved, and then we just sometimes keep putting our projects over people. So I'd like to take a close look at, I see the extra lighting, that's great. I know Ms. Carla talked about the trees, that's great, but I like to see a lot more security, some gates, some security guards, something that can be monitored, and that could be monitored a year or two past the project, and then 2 years I pass by there and the project's not looking as nice and pretty, and the cosmetics are not there, and you're done, you've already done your part, but yet we still remain in that community. So I'd really like to see some additional things.
Well, I could tell you on this, additionally, it does have a very good lighting plan because we realize security is important. So the parking areas are very well lit to the, I would say to the maximum that we can get in there. I mean, the city codes require a maximum amount, but we will like it to be adequately lit. And we will work with the sheriff. And sheriff there's plans that you can work out with him for he can be in there, you know, for trespassing and all kinds of other things. A notice is posted that he has the right to be in there if there's issues. So we will work with him. And even during construction, I mean, that's an important thing during construction, believe it or not, that those areas are protected because everything will walk off the site. So we work with the sheriff on all those issues for crime, and the sheriff, Lauren can attest, they're very, we between the landscaping and the sheriff and all the things to get all those things right. I mean, they don't want to have areas where people can hide, and you know, it's a big plan put together that we work with him, and it's an integral part of the whole planning process. And one of your conditions is that we get his sign off on the plan prior to the permitting.
Ms. King, if you have real concerns about that are not answered here tonight, we can always get another presentation on this.
Yes, I do. I think last night, a commission meeting last night, this was one of the things that was brought up, not your project in particular, but just the relationship or the lack of the relationship that we feel we should have with Broward Sheriff's Office. Anybody that was here last night, the meetings are recorded. If you get an opportunity to review it, there is supposed to be a scheduled meeting to meet with Sheriff Tony to address not just my concerns as I live in the community, but other concerns that people have, you know, consistently brought to the commission about projects that come into our neighborhood and they start off really good and then that's it. A year or two down the road, you know, we become disappointed, and those people that are homeowners, a lot of these people are just renters and they come in and out, but we still live there and we have to endure these things once the prettiness wears off and you're gone. And the lights aren't helping. So I just like to, when we're doing these projects going forward, I really, really like to see more done as it relates to security. And I'm sure if you look at those stats, you know, I'm not sure your conversation with Broward Sheriff's Office, but the stats don't lie, and that's what we'd be concerned with, and that's what was brought up at last night's commission meeting. So thank you for answering my question, though.
There is, you know, the stats are in the area in general are poor, so if we surely support the sheriff and all the upgrades and you know, personnel and anything we can do, and you know, we're not opposed to, you know, doing what we can to help along the way. I mean, it's an overall problem, but we realize where we are. We're next to commercial. We have a wall there. We tried to isolate ourselves as much as we could, but not to the point that, you know, that we're, you know, insulated, that nothing happens, because we know you got to prepare and plan and have the lighting and have all the septet principles in there in the plan. So we work with them, and you know, it's a collaborative effort between the sheriff and, like I say, we do what he wants, you know, because we don't want, crime doesn't do us any good either. So we work with him, and
I just think we have to be realistic to the people that are moving into those properties. Like we said, the trees aren't going to be grown the next day. So if that's what we're hanging our hat on, we have to have something, you know, a little bit more in-depth than that. But thank you for the information.
Okay. Other questions for the applicant before I open the public hearing? Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to open the hearing, public hearing on this. Would anybody in the audience like to speak on this project? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. And does anyone else on the board have discussion questions we'd like to discuss here?
Chair, I do. I too think that this has come prematurely to planning and zoning. And it seems like to come to us after it's been to the Architectural Appearance Committee, and also after the septet approval has been made, because that is a major concern in that area. I see that it's a great improvement on that street, and that there's walls around the whole property other than, and you can only enter and exit in the one area, so it's not an area that people can cut through and commit crimes. So I think that's a positive. But I kind of wonder, is this come to us prematurely before those two pieces have been finalized?
So just for a point of clarification, the BSO officers did sign off on the DRC review and give their approval. It's just a standard condition that we put on for all site plans, that they upload the correct plan that was approved at DRC into all the building permits, so that it's on the record.
So it has been approved?
It has been approved by BSO, yes.
Did we get a copy of that in our backup? There was so much backup for this.
Yes. No, the DRC comments are not normally the backup, included in the backup, but they are public record. I can email any of you.
We did get all of the DRC comments. I went through a lot of them, but I didn't go through all 7.
There is one in there.
There is one in there? Okay.
But it's from Keith.
Yeah. It's not the sheriff's office.
Right.
Okay. So point taken. I also noticed in going through some of the information, not all of the information, but on your different graphics, and a lot of them were very technical graphics, not site plan renderings, those sorts of things. We didn't have a lot of that were easily decipherable. But on the things I did notice, you may have different looks, sides of a building, and the windows in this one are one color, and the windows in this one are another color, and such. And I would urge you to go back over that and correct that before it goes to AAC, because they will catch that. And I'm not sure which was the color you meant. I think it was the gray, but in some of the renderings, the windows seemed white or yellow. So we've heard from 2 of the members here who would like to know more about the CEFTEC plan before they move this forward. So you've got a range of options on motions, and why don't we discuss that a minute and decide what we're going to do here? I'll accept any motion anybody wants to bring forth at this time, but if you want to talk about it some more, we can do that too. We can either approve this tonight, we can reject it tonight, or we can ask for more information for a time certain of next month.
I'd definitely like to see more information, Madam Chair.
When AAC is next week?
Second.
It's the
next
second,
week.
okay.
Our meeting next week.
So if this was postponed until next month, you'd be able to go to AAC and come back here with probably all those questions answered and all the backup in our, the plan.
Let me ask a technical question. Can we get this on next month's agenda?
Yeah, we would have to extend the submittal deadline for them to upload their proper documents.
Can we do that?
We can, we can on our side. I don't know if they're capable getting it done on their side.
Well, what we're asking for is AAC approval and more information on the septic plan. Okay?
On the septet plan is the narrative, we have a narrative in there, and we have drawings. I don't know what else.
What we're asking for is a presentation on it.
We can make a presentation on the septet plan, more detailed one.
I think that's what the board members here are asking for, because of the special concerns about crime in that area, and building projects that not only meet the letter of the code, but that are sustainable going forward. It will help us make sure that our codes are in the right place. But that's a decision for this board to make. You can ask for whatever information you want on any agenda. Am I right, Mr.? Well, on that particular point of the requirements.
I have to apologize. I heard one question I was trying to confirm with Bobby, if the question that the board is grappling is whether or not to postpone this item, because I thought that's what I heard.
Yes.
And whether or not that was going to create a problem because in the interim, there would be an AAC.
No, that won't, the AAC meeting is not the problem. What I think the board members are asking for is more information on the septic plan and the security involved with this project. And they asked for a presentation on it at next month's meeting.
So the postponement that you're requesting of this item is for additional information.
Yes.
Okay. And that's something that this board has the authority to request.
Okay.
So there's no issue there. Whether or not the applicant chooses to agree or disagree is a whole different issue. But as far as the board is concerned, you can always postpone the item.
Okay.
I guess my concern, Madam Chair, and to the applicant, I'm sorry, I'll wait.
Madam Chair, I also would recommend, should the board decide to go that direction, one of the things that I asked Mr. Atkins as well was the assigned officer, I believe he mentioned Deputy Noble?
Patrick Noble.
Patrick Noble. You may want to have him, because I don't know if you've ever experienced what that is and what considerations that he may be able to tell you about that are taken into consideration. That might help you. As Ms. King has mentioned last night at the City Commission meeting, there was lots of discussion about the rise in crime and how BSO is handling those and the impact on the city as a whole. So it may behoove this board to have the officer who does sit with the DRC kind of give his perspective, what goes into consideration, so that you have an idea when those plans come before you, what has been considered.
Okay. It's a good idea. All right, we're back to the point where the chair will accept a motion of whatever anyone wants to make.
Procedurally, do we need to move forward, or can they just agree? Oh, sorry, Mr. Saunders, procedurally, do we need to move for a postponement, or can the applicant just agree to postpone it to next month? Do we need to move forward?
I think that it's better if we ask for the postponement to next month, because he only has so many times he can do that, and should he need to do it again, we don't want to take up any of his postponements.
Okay, I have no problem making a motion to postpone item 2, which is the Covent Garden site plan, to our next scheduled meeting, which would be in April.
Okay, I think that's the 24th, is it not?
April 24th.
24th. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Do we need to add that we would like to have Officer Noble come from BSO to explain the plan to us? Does that need to be part of our motion?
No, you can just ask staff to make the arrangement, Doesn't need to be a part of any motion, as a part of maybe the presentation at the end or the beginning, however you want to do the presentation, but
I can request the Deputy Noble attend.
Call the roll.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz,
Yes.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Worley,
Yes.
Carla Coleman.
Yes. Thank you. We'll see you next month. Thank you, Deirdre. Okay, next item. Item number 3, Ambulatory Surgical Center ASC Code Amendment, P&Z number 24-8150. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. Ambulatory Surgical Centers. Ms. Dolan.
Madam Chair, Jean Dolan, Development Services. This proposed private sector-initiated code amendment is a very narrow amendment that will eliminate the 500-foot separation requirements from RS and RG residential zoning districts from ambulatory surgical centers, which we say ASC for short, under 5,000 square feet, while retaining the unpermitted use status in B1 and B2, as well as the special exception status in B3. It is unlikely that ambulatory surgical centers would generate off-site impacts that would be different from any typical medical or dental office of the same size, which are permitted uses in all business districts, B1, B2, and B3, and do not require separation requirements from residential zoning districts. The Institute of Traffic Engineers does not have a traffic generation category for ambulatory surgical centers, which supports the assumption that these are not unique in regard to traffic impacts. This begs the question of how the special medical facility use category and these separation requirements came about. The code amendment to create these special the regulations for special medical facilities was adopted in 2015. The urgent issue at the time was that 17 substance abuse facilities had located in Pompano between 2011 and 2015, and 7 of those were in 2015 alone. That was at the height of the opioid epidemic and the related deaths linked to unethical sober home and rehabilitation facility operators. The state of Florida adopted regulations in late 2015 that began to create a regulatory structure to address the issues of these deadly fraudulent activities. It is logical at this time to start to revisit some of the seemingly low-impact uses that were included in the special medical facilities category, such as ambulatory surgical centers, dialysis centers, and birthing centers, and non-24-hour urgent care offices to determine if the use restrictions are actually appropriate. There are 7 review standards for a code amendment. Number 1, consistency with the comprehensive plan. Number 2, does not conflict with any other code provisions. Number 3 is required by changed conditions. Number 4 addresses a demonstrated community need. Number 5 is consistent with the purpose and intent of the zoning districts or would improve compatibility among uses and would ensure efficient development of the city. Number 6 would result in a logical and orderly development pattern, and number 7 would not result in significantly adverse impacts on the natural environment. The staff report does detail how staff believes that these conditions are met, and I'm not going to go through all those details right now. I'm going to let the applicant present, because this is a privately initiated amendment. They would like to make the case for you, and then after they do have their make their case, we can go through questions that you have of staff or the applicant. So right now, staff is recommending approval of this code amendment and offers the following alternative motions. Motion 1 would be the board recommends approval of the code amendment as it finds regulating ambulatory surgical centers of 5,000 square feet or less, the same as other medical and dental offices of the same size in regard to distance requirements, is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and meets the review standards for publicly initiated code amendments. Motion number 2 would be the board recommends that item be tabled to give the applicant time to address any issues raised by the board, the staff, or the general public. And staff is recommending motion 1. So at this time, we'd like to give the applicant the opportunity to make their case, and then we can have our discussion following if that suits the board.
Yes, thank you.
Sir, have you been sworn in?
Yes, good evening. My name is Matthew Scott. I'm a zoning attorney with the law firm of Greenspoon Martyr, address of 200 East Broward Boulevard in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I have been sworn in. I'm here joined by my client, Dr. Dane Pullman, who has also been sworn in. And we're here, yes, presenting this proposed code amendment for ambulatory surgical centers. I want to thank Gene for the staff report, and then I just want to provide some more detail and background of how we got here, sort of tell the story of why we're here tonight asking to amend the code. So what you see on your screen is sort of the standard definition for what an ambulatory surgical center is. They are modern healthcare facilities focused on providing same-day surgical care, including diagnostic and preventive procedures. They really have transformed and helped the healthcare marketplace by giving millions of patients the ability to have outpatient treatments, avoid hospitals, save money, and they've done so with a strong track record of quality care and positive patient outcomes. So this is really something that has grown substantially over the last 10 or 15 years as an alternative to typical hospital stays, having to stay overnight. A lot of the procedures, what they're finding in the healthcare industry is that you don't need to go to a hospital. You can have a lot of these procedures in outpatient facilities. And so my client, Dr. Dane Pullman, who is an orthopedic doctor and a pain management doctor, provides medical services to his patients, but also provides minimally invasive surgical procedures, minor nerve adjustments or orthopedic adjustments that help patients avoid having to use opioids, help patients avoid majorly invasive back surgeries. And my client has offices in Coral Springs, Delray Beach, and identified that there was not a similar facility in Pompano Beach. And so my client over a year ago purchased this building you see on your screen and thought this would be great. It's not far from Broward Health North. My first job was at North Broward Medical Center. I think it's called Broward Health North now. It's been a while. This is just up the road from Broward Health North. And so this would be a sensible area to open a outpatient surgery center. And so here's just a quick map showing you where it is. It's on a major thoroughfare in the city that has B3 zoning. Unfortunately, after purchasing the property and starting with their building permits of building out the interior of an existing building with part of it being a medical office and part of it being a surgery center, my client found out that surgery centers are considered by the city a specialty medical facility. And so here's the rub. Here's how we got here. In the city of Pompano Beach, specialty medical facilities have specific regulations. They are only permitted in certain areas. They have specific hours. You have to obtain a special exception from the Zoning Board of Appeals to operate them in certain areas such as B3. And they cannot be within 500 feet of a residentially zoned area. So this was a big shock because, as it turns out, my client's property right behind it is a residential neighborhood. So here are some of the standards that are in the current code. So what you see is that they must be at least 500 feet from a single-family zoned area. No overnight treatment is permitted, and they have specific hours of operations. Now, I want to note my client and all surgery centers, for that matter, can easily comply with the criteria B and C. They never have overnight stays. They always have pretty standard medical office hours. But the issue was this distance separation requirement that we didn't really understand. And in speaking with staff and speaking with elected officials and speaking with some of the neighborhood, because we did outreach, there was confusion about why we wouldn't want to allow this on a B3 area. And so here's just an aerial again showing the issue. So on the south part is where the building is located, B3 Sample Road. But in a lot of B3 commercial areas, there will be residential behind. So effectively, what the zoning provision does, and I'm not sure anyone intentionally wants it to do that for ambulatory surgical centers, is prohibits them in any B3 area, because so much of the city has residential directly behind it. But me being a zoning attorney, Dr. Pullman came to me and said, please help me, what can we do? So we applied for the special exception, which is required no matter what for ambulatory surgical facilities, because they are a specialty medical facility in this city. So we did that application. As you can see, that was approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals. In fact, the Zoning Board of Appeals said, we think this is great. We We understand the need for this. We would like to have outpatient-type facilities in our city. However, we also applied for a variance because we asked for the variance from the 500-foot separation requirement. Zoning Board of Appeals said, I'm sorry, you don't have a genuine hardship. We must deny this. And so they said, while they understand we met all the criteria for the special exception, we went through that testing process, which is what a special exception process is. We don't have issues with it being an issue for the neighborhood. We met with the neighborhood. We had letters of support, lots of people saying they're perfectly fine with it, but we didn't comply with the criteria for a variance. So what are our options then? Our options then are to pursue this code amendment. And so we looked at the code, we did some research of other cities, and we tried to come up with a surgical amendment to the code, pun intended. Whenever you want to do code amendments, though, quite frankly, you want to be as minimally invasive as you can. You don't want to change too much of the code. You want to be thoughtful about not disturbing other considerations. And so what you see on your screen is our proposed code amendment that we're here to discuss tonight. There is logic, I believe, for the city of Pompano Beach to regulate where certain types of specialty medical facilities can go. There is a logic for not wanting drug detox or drug treatment centers right next to residential neighborhoods. And so this limitation does make sense in that context. But for ambulatory surgical facilities that have normal business hours, that don't have overnight stays, that have no outdoor uses whatsoever, have no noise, and provide this incredibly valuable service to residents of Pompano Beach, there doesn't seem to be a real logic or common sense reason to not allow them in areas that have residential nearby. And so what we're proposing to do is modify this one key provision that you see in blue in the code. Now, if the code amendment is approved, what we're seeking tonight is a recommendation of approval from the Planning and Zoning Board. It then goes to the City Commission for 2 readings, I believe. So we're seeking a positive recommendation tonight. I want to note that if the recommendation is positive, there will be no changes to various other aspects of the code. So as an example, currently the code requires in B3 zoned areas that a special medical facility must get special exception approval. I talked about earlier how that's a test. We're not seeking to change that because what special exceptions do is they require applicants to come forward and say, I'm serious about this business. Here's how I'm going to operate. Here's how my security is going to work. Here's how my solid waste pickup is going to work. You can interview the operator and ask any questions you might like. And so that's a really valuable testing process for certain types of uses. And understanding the sensitivity here, and that we already went through that process and had a unanimous vote of approval for that, we're comfortable keeping that in, that adds a layer of protection for the city that you will only get serious operators coming in and doing surgery centers because they have to go through that process. Similarly, we're not seeking to change this overnight stay prohibition or the hours of operation. Now, as far as the benefits side go, I spoke about it in the beginning of my presentation. There are ample benefits to ambulatory surgical centers. They help patients save money. They reduce healthcare costs for the entire country. They help people stay out of hospitals. They provide all these services for people that you would have to typically go to a hospital for. As an example, in my client's case, he provides these minimally invasive procedures that avoid major back surgeries and help people avoid long-term opioid use. This is something that, in our view, we want to encourage in the community. We want to make that type of service available to residents of Pompano Beach. Based on our research, there is not currently a minimally invasive outpatient surgery facility or an orthopedic surgery facility in the city of Pompano Beach right now. Now, I spoke earlier about impacts. There really are no real genuine impacts here. We're seeking a code amendment to allow for facilities that are less than 5,000 square feet in size. So it's small enough that you don't need to be concerned that it'll turn into a mini hospital of sorts. All activities happen indoors. Waste management is regulated by ACA. It has to go through with specific licensure, so there's not an issue of, lots of trash. And then there's less traffic and more desirable features than many B3 permitted uses. And so this is important for context. We're not seeking to open some sort of Pandora's box. The code today permits as of right, meaning no special exception test that I spoke about, how that's a valuable thing. You can just apply for a business tax receipt for transportation terminal, meaning people coming and going all day long to get on buses. A pet hotel, which I can tell you in my experience, creates a ton of noise, and no one wants in their backyard, because I dealt with this in another city, and it was brutal and I lost because no one wants it in their backyard. But you can do that in Pompano Beach today in any B3 zone district right next to a residence. Bowling alleys, bar nightclubs, permitted as of right in all B3 zoning districts. Tattoo parlor, I'm not sure that's a real problem, but I don't know that I'd want to live next door to a tattoo parlor. And similarly, fortune tellers are permitted in all B3 zoning districts. So my point here is that the city already contemplates that B3 zoning areas will be a high-intensity commercial area. And so doesn't seem to be a logic on our end for why you would want to prohibit specialty surgery facilities that help patients get better and avoid hospital stays. And so the last thing I want to share with you is that we did our research. We are not asking the city of Pompano Beach to be the vanguard in this industry. We're not asking you to go out on a limb here. Most other cities in the area either do not distinguish between medical offices to standard doctor's offices and ambulatory surgical facilities, or if they do distinguish them, they broadly permit ambulatory surgical facilities. So as you can see on this slide, Fort Lauderdale allows them as of right. Coral Springs allows them as of right, no special exception, up to 20,000 square feet. Deerfield Beach, same thing, as of right, no special exception. Pembroke Pines, the same. And then Coconut Creek allows them in their B3 and their B4. And so that would suggest that we're not asking you to sort of break the mold here, but rather to update your code to respond to sort of current market conditions and what we're seeing in other places that has not been a problem for those communities. Lastly, I think this is my last slide, I'll try to wrap it up, is the zoning map that Gene was kind enough to prepare that shows the B3 areas. And so you see that they're in heavy commercial corridors. And so this is not, we're not seeking to invade residential neighborhoods, it's your Chample Road, your Federal Highway, places like that. Sorry, I know I said that was my last slide, but I wanted to share this. We did go meet with the entire community. My client was kind and smart enough to knock on every single door around his property. Now, this code amendment is a policy matter, right? You're making the choice tonight to provide a recommendation to the City Commission as to what policy for the city should be. It is important, though, I think, that you get the background of the story, that on the front end of this, my client met with every single neighbor, knocked on their doors, and so your backup has all these letters of support of all these people saying, well, a bar can go here. We don't want a bar. We'd much prefer a high-end doctor's office like this. Thank you for allowing me to present. As you can imagine, this is incredibly important to my client, and so we would urge you to provide a positive recommendation of approval for that reason, but also because I think this is good policy for the city. I don't think there's a real strong logic for why you wouldn't want to allow these. When I spoke to a bunch of folks at the city, there was a lot of shoulder shrugging, and we're not really sure why we don't allow this. And so, again, we would request a recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Questions for the applicant?
Thank you. Question. So you talked about the opioids and avoiding them. Are they being prescribed at these facilities at all, or?
No, the ambulatory surgical facilities aren't a place to go get opioids. They're a place to get surgical procedures. So if opioids were going to be prescribed, it'd be from the normal medical office, like a doctor's office, which is permitted.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Smith?
It wasn't a question, it was more of a statement. I know that everyone's experienced the shortage of getting into a doctor. And the more specialty facilities that we can provide close to residential areas, I think is important to our residents in Pompano Beach. I don't have any objection with what you're wanting to do, and in fact, I think that it helps our residents, and it helps us to get service faster, because we're really having a hard time out here.
Ms. King?
Thank you for your presentation. Would your clientele be persons that may be indigent? Will they be able to receive services at your office?
Yeah, introduce yourself.
Or just people that have insurance? I'm just concerned about the people that Darlene spoke of, that may not have the top of the line insurance to maybe come to your facility. So you said you knocked on the doors, so I'm just asking.
No, of course. I'm Dr. Dane Pullman. I'm the applicant here. Yeah, so we take all insurances and, you know, people from all different places. And actually, it was interesting doing the door-to-door marketing to myself, to the community of this project, and the people living behind the building are from everywhere, you know. It was a melting pot, so to speak. So.
I have one other question. I've seen some things on the news as it relates to perhaps some facilities similar to yours. Would there be an issue if you had to have an emergency and you had to go to what I think North Broward, I don't know what it's called this week, but so do you have a relationship that these people will know that they could serve people that may have an emergency and have to be hospitalized from your facility? What would that look like?
So that's a good question, and that is defined by ACA, the governing body for surgical centers. So if there is a situation where a patient has to be sent to, we are required to have a relationship with a hospital, which obviously would be North Broward because it's right down the street, where that would take place. So that's all broken down in that criteria for the requirements to get approval with ACA to even be open. So.
And how frequently does that happen?
I mean, I've never seen it happen. I mean, I go to a couple surgical centers in the area that I do procedures currently. I've never sent someone out, but you know, even at a normal medical office, that it happens. You know, someone comes in to get evaluated and they have blood pressure of 230 or 30 over 140, and you're having a heart attack. You know, you call an ambulance and you send the patient to the hospital. So I mean, the same thing is going to happen anywhere, but certainly after a medical procedure, if there's something that's concerning, this facility is structured where you're able to stabilize that individual much better than a normal medical office you can, and then obviously they'd be transferred out, just like any urgent care or emergency room setting that they cannot provide services appropriately to that situation. So.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that while we're talking about this. So Dr. Pullman shared with me that the reason why they're called ambulatory surgical facilities is because the patient must be able to ambulate out, meaning get up and walk out. I don't know why I didn't realize that. That being said, the other thing is, you know, in all candor to this board, there is a distinction between this kind of facility and a freestanding ER. So freestanding ERs are very popular now. A lot of cities, a lot of hospitals are trying to open freestanding ERs wherever they can because it's a way, it's candidly a business generation tactic. If you can get someone into your ER and they have to be admitted, you can transfer them to your hospital, right? So you would think, as an example, a competitor of North Broward, if they were to get a freestanding ER next door, they would have a leg in. There is genuine concerns with having a freestanding ER next to a residential neighborhood because they must receive ambulances all hours of the day. There is never a scenario with an ambulatory surgical facility where an ambulance comes to bring a patient to it, right? It's appointment only. You don't have people, they're not seeing that type of patient. They're seeing scheduled patients for outpatient procedures. So there's a really big distinction. And so your code distinguishes between specialty medical facilities and freestanding ERs. I just want to share that sort of context.
Doctor, I have a question, or probably a couple, but are we talking like anywhere from trigger point injections to rhizotomies, those types of procedures?
I mean, I do rhizotomies in my office right now, in office-based setting, actually.
Okay.
But rhizotomies also are performed in this facility. You're talking more higher-level spinal procedures, things that are required to be performed there. Needle procedures.
Spinal fusions, or?
Not that common.
Okay.
It's possible. It would not be multi-level. It'd be a one-level type thing. Patients are walking out. Usually it's going to be needle-based procedures.
Okay.
You know, that's the primary things that are performed in this facility, yeah. I mean, certainly there's other specialties that use these facilities like gastroenterology. Yeah, it's very common, you know, that would not be here just because, but that's another common thing that's done. Ophthalmology.
Yeah, and I'll just say also, I mean, not in the discussion moment, but there's not a lot of these down in this area. So it's good.
Any more questions from this end?
I just had one more question. So I'm just trying to understand, what's the difference between this type of facility and like an urgent care type of facility?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's totally different. I mean, this is a place, like he was explaining, high-level semi-surgical versus surgical procedures are performed. I mean, but again, it's the patients are supposed to be able to ambulate out of the facility, so they're outpatient things. Patients are not, they're legally not allowed to stay overnight at this facility. As opposed to an urgent care where you're going in, you might have the flu. That's not what this is. This is, you have a scheduled surgical procedure that, you know, we have authorization with Medicare or other insurances to perform. And instead of going to the hospital setting where, you know, the undertaking of doing that, it's much quicker, it's more efficient, and cost-effective, honestly. So a lot of insurance companies are very happy with these facilities because of that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, clarify.
So the Agency for Healthcare Administration regulates ambulatory surgical facilities separate from urgent care. So we are here. The whole reason we're here is because in order to open one of these facilities and then provide these treatments and bill insurance for them, is you have to get the license, the approval from ACA. And so you have to present to ACA what you are and what you're going to do. And so that's the key distinction point with an urgent care facility.
Another question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What,
Are you finished? Okay. Go ahead, Ms. King.
do you handle the post-treatment as well? So post-surgery, what happens? They just go to their own
Yeah, so,
doctor? Or?
I mean, you know, my medical office is currently, we see patients, you know, I was there today and seeing patients. So there's also going to be a medical office in this building as well, which is another location from my medical practice. It's just, this facility is a separate entity itself. It's a different business, it's a different thing. So of course, you know, we'll be following up with these patients in the office, yeah.
I've just asked that question to see like how many people will be going in and out. You said that you spoke to the residents. So will you have, you know, 20, 30 patients going out, just so the people in the residence will know, hey, this is busy only between these hours because, you know, people might be coming in for some post-treatment or surgeries, but, you know, to get a gauge as to how many people will be occupying your building in that space. Urgent care is busy.
So that's the other much different situation compared to urgent care to this type of facility. You're probably talking 10 to 15 patients total a day that would come to this facility. So it's very low volume, you know, higher level procedures, low volume foot traffic. So.
Thank you.
Okay. I have a couple. You're probably very aware, Mr. Scott, that unlike, you may be aware, unlike the city of Fort Lauderdale that allows hospitals in B3, we do not allow freestanding emergency rooms or hospitals within 500 feet of residential. And there have been some applications along those lines that the city has rejected. I just want to make sure that we are not opening the door here for that. You have been pretty plain about what this facility is, but I want to ask our attorney whether he feels we have a strong enough definition of what an ambulatory surgical center is as opposed to a hospital setting in our code.
Madam Chair, I had an opportunity to speak with not only staff, but also Mr. Scott, and sort of expressed that while this board is looking at the applicant,
right,
you really need to look at beyond the applicant, the actual text amendment that's being proposed. Because you're talking about, and again, I'm not saying this to, as a negative response to the applicant, but more so what your board is going to be tasked with. And that is, you're looking at whether or not ambulatory surgical centers that are less 5,000 square feet or less, whether or not those types of facilities, irrespective of the applicant, should be excluded. And I think, as I mentioned to Mr. Scott and Ms. Dolan on this issue, nowhere in our code is ambulatory surgical centers truly defined. What's defined is the specialized medical facility as what is proposed. And let me just share with you what that, if you look back at the definition, the specialty, medical facility is a facility, regardless of size, offering specialized treatment and services, including but not limited to the ambulatory surgical facility, dialysis centers, substance abuse treatment facilities, outpatient rehabilitation facilities, birthing facilities, and urgent care facilities. And the specific section in the standards is the facility, as relation to separation from residential uses, the facility other than the ambulatory surgical facility, less than 5,000 or less, shall be at least 500 feet from the single-family or two-family zoning districts. As I mentioned, that particular sort of squaring off still leaves a very open door, because ambulatory surgical centers, if you just Google it, you're going to get a variety of subject matter or definition. Even looking at the Florida statutes, I looked earlier today in section 395.002, ambulatory surgical centers means a facility the primary purpose of which is to provide elective surgical care in which the patient is admitted to and discharged from such facility within 24 hours, and which is not part of a hospital. And then it goes on with some others, and there are regulations related to that. Again, as I mentioned before, if you look, just Google the term, you'll see that it talks about that they have surgeries and fully equipped operating rooms and recovery under the care of a highly skilled nurse, all without hospital admissions. Typically, the surgeries in several specialties. It could be eye care, sports medicine, chiropractic, a variety, gastroenterologist, enterology. So there's a host of things that could fall underneath this, irrespective of the licensure that occurs. And so when you put all of that out there, whatever you carve out needs to have some definition to it, because it potentially, you may be met with another person, an application that comes up and says, well, mine is different. This is why it's different. So I just caution you, I told Mr. Scott that I would mention this, that we need to really define what this is so that all applicants coming through will be treated equitably as to what they are doing at this location. Just ask you that you take that in consideration.
Would it be appropriate to ask staff to work with you on an appropriate definition? Like Ms. Smith, I see the real need for this kind of facility and don't want to forestall that. But I don't want, and I was, the hours of operation, 10 o'clock's a little later than the typical medical or dental office stays open. Is that, I thought it was 7 to 7. But this is giving us 10 to 7, allowing you to stay.
I've never, in my career, ever been to a facility that's open really after 3 p.m. I mean, this is a early morning, like Friday mornings, I'm at the surgical center. I do cases, I'm done by noon.
But for a policy matter, so, yeah, we understand that. So it's very common with code amendments, in my experience, between Planning and Zoning Board and City Commission, for there to be, as part of a recommendation of approval, that you ask for modifications or additions.
Okay.
So that's not out of line. I was trying, in crafting this code amendment, to be as specific and
minimal.
Minimal.
I heard you.
You don't want to open up a million different things.
We really are scared of opening up the Pandora's box here.
But I think that the easy way to do it, I would disagree with the city attorney, is to simply reference state statute's definition of ambulatory surgical centers.
Well, if that's what he read, it says discharge within 24 hours, and that's not what we're after here.
Well, and so to the point, though.
So we would need to limit the hours. I'm comfortable in putting it in line with other doctors in dentist's office of a 7 to 7, as opposed to a 10 to 7. But I think the key here is the limitation on the hours to make it compatible with the neighborhood. And we do not want to drift into the freestanding emergency rooms and such that we're
yeah, whatever the board recommends, we're fine with. We're kind of saying the same thing. However we get there, we're fine with it.
At least that's my thoughts. But I failed to open a public hearing on this matter, so I need to do that before we go too much further. Does anyone in the audience want to speak on this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. We've got that out of the way.
So I think between Medicare guidelines, the AMA and ACA, between those definitions, you can kind of come up with something. And I think the words same day, probably, I guess maybe hyphen one word, but should be somewhere in there with the definition. And I just was quickly looking it up because I think we all understand what you're trying to do. And I think that's the concern. And I know I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals when an issue came through with one of those freestanding ERs, and that was my number one concern when I saw this. But I know what you all do. I mean, I know what you do specifically, and I get what you're trying to do. So was looking at some definitions, and maybe there's a way to do this, submitting approval. I don't know if we do that right the second or how that works.
I'm comfortable letting staff and the attorney work on that definition, if that works for you.
I think Mr. Scott and I, Ms. Dolan, can craft something. There's only one question I need to ask through the chair to the applicant. There was, in the presentation, it was mentioned that this particular surgical facility would have diagnostic or preventative procedures. And I want to make sure, was that a component that was integral to this facility? Because I'm seeing otherwise. So I want to make sure when you stated earlier diagnostic or preventative procedures, I wanted to make sure I knew what that was.
I mean, I think that's sort of semantic because it's, I mean, you know, getting.
I'll give you a prime example of what I'm referring to. If I were to go to my doctor, on my doctor visit, my doctor says, hey, I want to set you up to go to a GI, or I want to set you up to go have your colonoscopy done, which is a task. So I now have a surgical center that I go to. I've got an appointment. I've got a day to be there. I get in there early. They do the procedure, as the doctor mentioned. I'm out. Not a problem. So when we talk about diagnostic, they're not doing any sort of beyond prepping me for the actual procedure. I'm not sure what diagnostic or procedure that you're referring to. And the reason I'm asking it now is because I don't want us to get into discussion on the definition and then we disagree on that point. I want to make sure it's clear that I understand what you're asking, because it was in your presentation. That's the only reason I'm mentioning it.
Yeah, no, we stand by that. I think that, however, whatever it is that ACA permits for an ambulatory surgical facility to conduct, as a policy matter, should be what is allowed for. So whether it's diagnostic or preventative or treatment-based, I don't think, as a policy matter, it's something the city should be distinguishing between.
Well, again, I respectfully disagree with you, because there are items that very clearly have been mentioned by this board already that are in our code that would go contrary to what the statute defines as an ambulatory. Very simply put, it says that it must be done within 24 hours. Our code says, no, it's got to be less than that.
Right. Well, but that would relate to duration, which we can regulate for easily. That can't. But getting into type would take us down a whole other path that I don't think. If an ambulatory surgical facility is allowed to, as an example, the colonoscopy is a good one. Colonoscopy is a very popular ambulatory surgical facility. Right. It's a diagnostic process. The purpose of that is to see what's in someone's colon. Correct? So I don't know what, yeah.
Essentially, that is a diagnostic procedure. I mean, so, you know.
I guess what I'm saying, I'm not talking about the actual surgery that's to be performed. I'm talking about anything other than the actual surgery itself. So when you mentioned it in your presentation, I'll make it easy. When you mentioned that term in your presentation, you were talking about the actual surgery to be performed. Whether the surgery is being done for diagnostic purposes or the surgery is being done for preventative purposes. Is that what you meant?
I don't think that I intended to make a distinction.
I-
It's a place that,
I think what I saw, so for instance, if you're doing injections and you have a scope, you may be also conducting a diagnostic, interpretation while you're doing that. And I think that difference probably has to do more with insurance billing and Medicare billing. Because if, for instance, that definition, if you flesh that thing out entirely, they may have issues being able to bill, CMS or being able to bill certain health insurances with overlap.
right, that's why I'm trying to be thoughtful we're happy to work on a definition that limits the hours, but this ambulatory surgical facilities, ambulatory surgical centers is a term of art that is legally regulated and has specific allowances. And so we're free to disagree, but I'm not going to limit that in some sort of definition here, whether it's diagnostic or not. I'd rather just say, here's our code amendment, we're happy to work on an hours limitation and perhaps a definition.
Mr. Saunders, can we ask you to do that? If you can't come to agreement, come back to us,
Sounds good.
okay?
Right.
So, can we act on this amendment with those caveats tonight?
I just have one other question before you move there.
Absolutely.
Attorney Saunders just made me think of this. I'm sorry, I have like 2 hours of YouTube experience as it relates to medical things. So a person is only would a regular person that just says, okay, my knee is hurting, and they don't require surgery, can that person receive services at your office?
Yes. They would go,
Yes, that's an office patient appointment, yes. If they need to have a procedure performed on that knee, this facility now would offer an option where possibly something higher level than just a basic injection could be performed at this facility, rather than that person having to go to a hospital setting to have it performed.
I just don't, maybe A doesn't have anything to do with B, but I just wouldn't want this to become, people would view this as some sort of pain clinic, that people can just come and say, oh, my knee hurts, and you said you're not giving out the opiates, so how do you distinguish between that person that's just coming there for day-to-day treatment, or are they coming there for the surgery? I thought you were just doing the surgeries, but a regular person can come there for treatment for orthopedic type services.
Are we talking about the surgical center or my medical office? Because that's a big distinction here. So, the surgical center is not a walk-in clinic in any capacity. It's an elective, scheduled procedure that whether myself or another physician in the community that will become on staff at this facility could then schedule his patient to have a procedure performed there. So no, this is not a walk-in clinic in any way. These are scheduled elective things that are approved by their insurance company, that are submitted for authorization, things like that. So this is not somewhere someone's going to walk in and have an evaluation performed. They've already been evaluated.
Okay, I thought that was what Mr. Saunders was saying.
This is why we're confused. So
Yeah, that's why we need a definition. And so I think that I'm comfortable with the three of them working it out, and if they can't, they come back to us. So, who's ready to make a motion?
I have a motion.
Mr. Lewis.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of the text amendment as amended, with the two conditions that we amend the hours of operation and defined ambulatory surgical center within the code, and move that to the city commission for their consideration.
Second.
Call the roll.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz,
Yes.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Worley,
Yes.
Carla Coleman.
Yes.
thank you very much. We appreciate it. This really means a lot. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Ms. Dolan, item 4 is yours as well. Ear-based comprehensive plan text amendment, P&Z number 24-92000003.
Thank you, Madam Chair. G. Dolan, Development Services. Chapter 163.3191 Florida statutes and Rule 73C-49 require the city to provide an evaluation and appraisal report, which we call an EAR, letter to the state every 7 years to identify any changes to population projections, city direction, or state legislation in that period that would signal a need to update the adopted comprehensive plan. Rule 73C-49 was adopted in 2017 and established the January 1st, 2024 date for our 7-year evaluation and appraisal report letter. This date no longer tracks with the adoption date of our comprehensive plan. Our plan was adopted in October of 2020, and therefore we are less than 4 years into our 20-year planning horizon. Our population projections are still accurate. Currently, they're running about 5% below the projections, so there's no need to update our comprehensive plan. The only changes made to the Florida statute since the comprehensive plan was adopted in 2020 that require an amendment to the city's plan can be found in Chapter 163.3177, Paragraph 5A. These regulations changed the required planning horizons from a 5 and 20-year period to a 10 and 20-year period, and that was through Senate Bill 1604 in 2023. The data and analysis for our existing 2020 comp plan was based on the 20-year planning horizon for all the public facility impact calculations. It was found that the city could serve the projected population through 2040. Therefore, none of the calculations were necessary in this near-term planning horizon. So very few amendments are required or necessary for the adopted elements of the comp plan to address the change in length of the near-term planning horizon. So the planning horizons were only referenced twice in the goals, objectives, and policies of the adopted 2020 comp plan. These occurred in the introduction to the transportation element and in policy 7A0202 in the potable water sub-element. Both of these sections have been modified to be consistent in the revisions to the planning horizons. So staff is requesting the board recommend approval of the ear-based amendments and offer the following alternative motions. Motion 1, board recommends approval of the ear-based amendments to the goals, objectives, and policies of the adopted 2020 comprehensive plan to comply with section 161.3191 Florida statutes and the 2023 revision to chapter 163.31775. Motion 2 would be the board to recommend the item be tabled to allow further analysis of any issues raised by the board, staff, or the general public. And staff recommends motion number 1, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions? Okay. Do I need to open a public hearing on this?
Yes.
Yes. I open a public hearing on this. Does anyone from the audience wish to be heard on this item? If not, I will close the public hearing on this. Does anyone on the board have questions of Jean? In other words, we're just matching what the state statute tells us we need to match.
That's right.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Ms. King?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of the text amendment as amended for the city commission. Oh, no, sorry. Yes, to approval as amended to the city commission for their consideration.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Bobby, call the roll.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz,
Yes.
Derek Lewis,
Yes.
Darlene Smith,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Worley,
Yes.
Carla Coleman.
Yes. Mr. Wymus, I think you're up next. Text amendment, section 155.4501, separation requirement for alcohol beverage establishments.
Good evening, Chairman and the Board. Max Weems, Development Services. This is a staff-initiated text amendment to Section 155.4501, the separation requirements for alcohol beverage service establishments. Our code already requires a minimum distance separation for uses involving the sale of alcoholic beverages from things like sexual-oriented businesses, childcare facilities, schools, places of worship, or other uses that also provide alcoholic beverages. Some of those uses that involve the sale of alcohol are exempt from separation requirements, and then those such uses that are exempt are not then considered in the future for other applications. So let's say like a Chili's, for example. It's a large restaurant. You'd expect it to have a bar. They are exempt from our code separation requirements for meeting certain criteria. Then if a business next door wants an alcoholic beverage license, we wouldn't say, oh, sorry, you're too close to a Chili's. They also serve alcohol, for example. One of the exemptions in our code is based on the definition of a state liquor license for bars that are accessory to a restaurant, and that is the focus of this text amendment, is that exemption. The state licensing requirements and the city distance separation requirements generally allow restaurants meeting certain criteria to qualify for what's called a 4COP SFS liquor license. That's consumption on premises, special food service, something like this, which allows for the sale of beer, wine, and spirits, or hard liquor, for on-premise consumption. So restaurants in Pompano, they would be able to have a 2,500 square foot facility capable of serving 150 patrons at a time, but restaurants can now qualify for a full liquor license if they only have 2,000 square feet and seat 100 and have 120 seats. That would now meet the state's definition of this particular license. And just because I was researching it and I was curious myself, the annual fee for that is $1,820. I was generally curious, so putting that there for you. So now, with this change, the criteria for these restaurants to get this particular type of license is 2,000 square feet, capable of seating 120 patrons, 120 physical seats during operating hours, holds itself as a restaurant, and at least 51% of the restaurant's gross food and beverage revenue comes from a sale of non-alcoholic beverages or food during the first 120 days, and then there's like a sliding scale of that period as evaluated. Not really important for this text amendment. So our code, which mirrors the definition of the state's licensing category for exemption, currently references that former definition of 150 seats and 2,500 square feet. So to be consistent with that definition, we are proposing to revise our separation requirement to 120 seats and 2,000 square feet. So what this will do is more businesses will be eligible for exemption because it's a smaller square foot and less patrons. That's the crux of the amendment. While I was in that section, there was a capital S, it shouldn't be capital, and there was a citation that referenced the AOD and not the EOD, which are overlay districts, which have other exemptions. So just as cleanup, since I was there, I threw that in as well. The text amendment review standards, there's 7 categories that are provided there. The impact of this revision is that more businesses will be eligible to exemption, so it remains consistent with our comprehensive plan and our review criteria. And so, given the information provided to the board, the Development Services Department provides the following alternative motion options, which may be revised or modified at your discretion. Staff is recommending alternative motion 1, which reads, the board recommends approval of the code amendment as it finds the proposed revisions of the separation requirement for alcoholic beverage establishments consistent with the comprehensive plan and meets the review standards for a zoning code text amendment. That's my presentation. I think it's pretty brief and to the point, but I'm available for questions.
Questions? Is there any reason why we would want to remain more restrictive?
From my point of view, no. I have no issue with restaurants having bars. I think that it makes sense to be consistent with if this business is eligible for that license, but then all of a sudden isn't going to get a zoning use certificate because there's another, whatever, I keep using Chili's as an example, but restaurant with a bar that's too close but would otherwise be exempt, it doesn't really make sense, and I think it's adding layers to the confusion that is bureaucracy. So,
and this is not being done because, do we have any pending applications this would hit?
No, this change actually took effect last summer, and we have only received one inquiry where a future a hotel. It's a mixed-use project, and it includes a restaurant, which would have a bar. And I don't think that they would be. I don't think that they would have complication getting approval because there's not another business within the separation that's required. However, they still wanted to know if our code was going to be modified to reflect the state statute, which brought it to my attention. So here we are. But there aren't any current applications held up pending this amendment.
Motion.
Open for-
Oh, you're right. I need to open a public hearing on this. Anyone of the audience like to speak on this item? Come to the mic. This is the alcoholic beverage. And please state your name and address for the record.
LaShante Brown, sorry about my attire. So I know you were saying the alcoholic and beverage amendment, but you also mentioned it's in regards to certain facilities who do not have license, correct? Like to give out those beverages. Is that what you were saying?
So any of the affected businesses would also have a state-issued alcoholic beverage license.
Okay, and then as of the amendment, what does the amendment specifically state?
So the amendment is to amend our code's requirement for distances between those uses. So some uses are exempt from separation requirements, and then others are not. The amendment is to allow businesses of, that are consistent with the state definition for a liquor license to be exempt from separation requirements.
And what's the probable cause?
The probable cause for?
Your appeal.
So we already have a separation requirement in our code, or exemption within our code, and the cause for this amendment is to be consistent with the basis of that separation requirement. So now if we don't amend our code to be consistent with that definition, there's now like a conflict between this separation requirement was established with that definition in mind, but now we're no longer consistent with it. So really we're just looking to be consistent with where we got the separation requirement from in the first place.
Right, so are your concerns more based on there being conflict in future terms of more laws being overridden?
No, my concern is more if I'm a business owner and I know that I'm eligible for a liquor license from the state because I meet certain criteria, and then all of a sudden I go and apply to the city and that criteria is just slightly above and I'm no longer eligible, but I think it's just creating confusion between why am I eligible with the state but not the city. So we're just trying to clean that up so that we're on the same page.
Okay.
The change is really very minor, from 2,500 to 2,000 feet.
Right.
And someone in Tallahassee decided to change it, and so we're having to change ours, so everything is seamless.
On the same page. Okay, I see. I think it's okay.
The extent of the revision is on the screen. So the top line there is what it currently states, or sorry, the top block of text is what it currently states, and the bottom block of text is the change. And so it's changing 150 to 120 and 2,500 to 2,000. And I'm pulling those numbers specifically from the state's definition.
Okay, yeah, that seems pretty fair.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for coming out tonight. Seeing no one else ready to speak, I'll close the public hearing and board discussion.
I have a motion.
Go forth.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of the text amendment, which is in LN 585, as amended to the City Commission for their consideration.
Second that.
Bobby, please call the roll.
That was
Derek
Smith?
Oh, she seconded.
Derek, first, I was second.
You're a second, okay. Derek Lewis?
Yes.
Darlene Smith?
Yes.
Tundra King?
Yes.
Richard Kloskowitz?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Worley?
Yes.
Carla Coleman?
Yes. Thank you. Audience to be heard. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the board? Okay. Other business. Reports by staff? Mr. Saunders. Mr. Kozowitz.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Ms. Worley, thank you for joining us tonight. Ms. Smith.
I just want to say, check out visitpompanobeach.com, because there's some webcams up, and the webpage was released today, I believe. Really nice job by the city.
Good.
Check it out.
Ms. King.
Thank you. I think I spoke of one of my concerns earlier, which was about the meeting with the Broward Sheriff's Office. I don't think that I haven't heard that it's been scheduled yet, but I do think that's something down the pike. And I think that's something that's definitely could impact how we do business here. The other concern is that I've been following the issues with some of our schools potentially being closed. I'm devastated by that. But I think that's something, again, that we would have to keep in mind for future projects, because some of our students may, I may move in that area thinking, oh, there's a school right across the street that my child can attend, and that may not necessarily be so. So I think that's something that we have to keep our eyes open to in the very near future. I think it may impact our 25-26 school year. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
And just thank you for allowing me to chair tonight. And with that, Mr. Koskowitz.
Madam Chair, on behalf of the staff and members of the board, I move we adjourn.
We are adjourned.